Good morning and welcome to a brand new episode of NH Unscripted. Lucky listeners. I am Ray Dudley, your host. We are coming to you from the Gong Show-like dig of the WKXL studios in Concord, New Hampshire. I got my Nehru jacket on, my bell-bottom pants, and my platform shoes. Your job, kick back on those water beds, get the lava lamps going. Hey, burn a little incense if you want. Break out those Sony Walkmans, baby, because we are coming to you 1450 AM, 103.9 FM in Concord, New Hampshire, 101.9 FM for those beautiful souls in Manchester. And there's a heck of a lot going on out at our URL, which is nhtalkradio.com. No need to go there just yet. You know, some of the most fascinating people I enjoy talking to are filmmakers. They tend to be very cutting edge. They tend to be very innovative people. And today we have on the line Alan Govenar. Sir, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes.
Alan, you're going to be talking to us here in a second about the film Quiet Voices in a Noisy World, The Struggle for Change in Jasper, Texas. But before we do that, can you give us a little bit of insight into who you are? And then I'm going to try to jam in some PR stuff here.
Where do I start?
Yes.
Well, since we're in New Hampshire, I think I start by talking about the fact that I'm from Boston. I grew up in Dorchester. My parents moved to Marblehead in 1959. I graduated high school there, and I went to college at Ohio State, University of Texas, and I've had a very free-form life and career of my own making. And in part, that was by necessity, in part, and mostly, as the years have gone by, certainly by choice. I'm a writer. I write poetry. I write novels. I've written plays. I am a filmmaker. I've worked in radio. I've worked in multimedia. And I've organized exhibitions. So I'm very much an interdisciplinary artist.
That is incredible.
Filmmaking is one medium that means a great deal to me. But usually for me, the subject defines the medium that I want to work in. And some subjects, like this movie, span many years and take different forms.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Let me just add a little bit here from the press release that Kelly sent me. You are a Guggenheim Fellow, an extensively published author, photographer, filmmaker, sound archivist, and playwright, whose work has explored the American culture through an incredible range of lenses. You have founded institutions like the Documentary Arts, the Texas African American Photography Archives, the Museum of Street Culture, and Truth in Photography to spotlight a commitment to documenting marginalized voices and social change in America. You have written over, according to this release, 40 books, and I'm going to guess various, we said, poems and stuff like that. Sir, that is quite a pedigree. Are there some of these that you tend to I mean, obviously writing is a forte for you, and we will be talking about your filmmaking here in just a second. Do you tend to lean towards certain mediums?
Well, for me, I started making photographs when I was probably 12 or 13 years old. My father had bought a science kit for my older brother, and the one kit that he never really opened was the one about photography. And it came with a little camera that had film that was half-inch negatives, and it was a build-your-own enlarger and darkroom kit. And so that was my first introduction to photography. But I didn't really continue with that. I made this enlarger. I took a series of photographs, and they were fuzzy little black and white prints. And for me, I guess my most serious kind of undertaking creatively began a few years later. And I started writing poetry when I was 17. I started my first book at age 18. And that was a poem that became a short story and ultimately was published as a novel in 2025, last May. It's called Come Round Right. And my documentary work began a bit later, and when I was a junior at Ohio State, I was taking a folklore class, and I needed to do a fieldwork project. And for my 21st birthday, my parents had bought me a 35 millimeter camera that I wanted. And I went off with my camera, seeing what I would discover. And it was in the process of doing that my first photographic serious subject emerged. It was a man by the name of Stoney St. Clair, Leonard L. Stoney St. Clair. I had seen his tattoo shop the night before I came with my camera. There was a sign that said, as ancient as time, as modern as tomorrow, tattooing by the teacher of the arts since 1928. And the night before, once again, kind of melded a lot of my ways in which I think creatively, because I looked into this tattoo shop, and it was an electric eye flashing on and off. There was this hunched-over man in a wheelchair and a basset hound howling at me. It was a mix of the Twilight Zone, Franz Kafka, and a documentary reality that just totally excited me. So I went back the next day and started snapping away, taking pictures of the front of his shop, and he told me to get away from there.
He did?
He shouted out to me, and I went off, and I was in this part of Columbus, Ohio, where it was a kind of a Appalachian migrant area, and there was a dilapidated train station. I made photographs there, and then I came back to his shop, and this man shouted to me that I could come in now. And he scolded me for not asking permission to make his photograph.
God, yeah.
And I apologized because I was in the wrong. And he asked me to sit down. I sat down across from this little table. He was a hunchback dwarf in a wheelchair, could barely open his hands flat. And he did everything he could, I think, to try to show me his world, but also to see what kind of person I was. He asked me to feel his little withered up arm. He told me he had tattoos underneath his eyelids. And then he pulled a pistol, a cylinder pistol from his, I think it was a .38, out of his wheelchair and slammed it on the table and emptied the cylinder with his bullets. And they were hollow point bullets. And he kind of cackled and said, "You know what a hollow point bullet does when it enters the body?"
A lot of damage. Yeah.
And so I was shaking in my shoes, and this man came in, and he was a big guy, looked like maybe he was 300 pounds, and he wanted to get a tattoo. And the tattoo that he got was a skull with a dagger going through it that said the inscription, "Death before dishonor." And Stoney looked at this man and said, "Boss, you're not afraid to let this boy make your picture, are you?" And that became my first photographic subject.
Your first? Your very first?
Yes.
Wow.
And I went back to see Stoney every week for the next about 7 years. And as I got to know him, I realized the immensity of his story. I was just totally captivated by him. I was inspired by him. I mean, he had been denied an education because he was considered too grotesque to go to school.
Oh, Alan, hang on right there for a second. Hang on. I'm going to park you right there. We got to pay some bills here temporarily. I want to catch more of that. That's going to be your Stony Knows How thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, hang on. I want to dig that more out. We're coming to you from the YMCA-like conditions of the WKXL studios in Concord. I told you. Filmmakers are the brilliant people in this world. 1450 AM, 103.9 FM on your Sony Walkmans, 101.9 FM for those beautiful souls in Manchester. Alan Govenar's on the line. Filmmaker, photographer, artist, writer. We will be right back. Welcome back to NH Unscripted. Yeah, baby, we are coming to you from the Hollywood Square-like digs of the WKXL studios in Concord. I love to sit in that center square. NHTalkRadio.com is our URL here at the station. We are talking with Alan Govenar. I unfortunately stopped him midstream as he was talking about Stony, the tattoo artist. Alan, I jumped you there for a second, buddy. Why don't you finish that up?
So I went to see Stony every week for about 7 years. And I finished my college paper for my folklore class, rewrote it, became a journal article for the Journal of Ohio Folklore, and I realized that I wanted to do a book about Stony. By then, I was in graduate school in Austin at the University of Texas, and I was finishing my master's degree and realized that there was an important book to be done here because Stony's story ran counter to the popular culture of the day. There was a time when David Lynch was working on Elephant Man.
Yes.
And Stony often commented to me that he thought the Elephant Man story wasn't accurate about the life of the circus sideshow because Stony, as I mentioned, was someone who was, physically very disabled from rheumatoid arthritis. As a child, his growth was stunted, and yet he taught himself to draw. His grandparents taught him to read, and he was part of this community of people who were called circus and carnival freaks.
Even though he was working as a tattoo artist.
Well, but he really primarily saw himself. He started as a sword swallower. He had an uncle that had a cookhouse in the circus, the Cole Brothers Circus. And Stony agreed to let me do a book about him, which is basically an oral autobiography that I edited together with his help. And on the condition that when he died, that I would write his obituary and not call him just a tattoo artist. He saw himself as an actor on the outdoor stage, and he was part of that community of people who were actors on the outdoor stage, which I thought was just profound. And so I came back to Columbus, Ohio. I spent a couple of years finishing the book and was trying to get it published. But once again, it ran counter to kind of the stereotype of the exploitation of circus and carnival people. I mean, Stony was very successful at what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And in the midst of all that, I got the idea that I wanted to make a movie and about him. And he agreed to let me do that. And by then, I was teaching part-time at an art college in Columbus, and I asked the dean if I could use the college as a fiscal agent to receive funds, grants that I was applying for, particularly to the National Endowment for the Arts. And the college agreed on the condition that they would never receive a credit in the final movie.
What?
The fact that it was about tattooing at that time in the 70s and about this man who was clearly very unique and different, they didn't want they didn't want their name associated with
Wow, shame on them, shame on them.
So eventually, I was able to make the movie. I went through a few different film crews. Eventually, I met Les Blank and Pacho Lane, and together with them, I made this movie. And it premiered in New York in 1981 at Film Forum. It showed the following spring as part of the new director's series at MoMA. And I had the good fortune of it being reviewed by Vincent Canby, who was then the A-list reviewer for the New York Times. And I started on a career making movies as a result of that. And Les Blank was very much of a mentor to me. And Les and I later did another little short film called Cigarette Blues. And I learned a lot about Les, about the indie film world, because he was such a pioneer in the way in which he did his movies, the way he presented them to the public. And he was, someone who was very important in my life. So that was a very pivotal time for me. It's when I began to realize that I could work in more than one medium. Because concurrent with me doing this book about Stoney, making this movie, I was still writing poetry. I've written poetry my entire life, and I still write poems just about every day. And I was also working on short stories. I couldn't get enough of wanting to write in different forms, wanting to explore different media of expression, from photography to sound recording to film. And that's who I have become. And I'm still very active. And the Stoney film, which has been now in active distribution for more than 40 years. And my book on Stoney was, a couple of years ago, published in a 40th anniversary edition. So it's still in print today.
What was the reaction to it?
I mean, the first edition of that book was published by a university press.
Yeah.
University Press of Kentucky. So, it got some circulation within that realm of that world. But where it really became important was in the tattoo world, because the younger tattoo artists saw this as, as important, that it was one of the first books that was looking seriously at that time at tattooing as an art form. So what's really kept all of that going has been the tattoo world. I mean, when I was working on that 40th anniversary edition, there was a photograph in my first edition of a young couple. They looked like they were probably 18, that another photographer had made, Dan Dry in Kentucky, that I published. And for the 40th anniversary edition, there was this kind of series of events that led me to meet this couple all those years later. And they posed for a similar photograph, holding the book, showing the original photograph. And there were people I talked to, and I still get emails from people who watch this movie often. I mean, there's one person I talked to who said, I've watched your movie more than you have. I've watched it every morning for 15 years.
What?
Because it makes me feel good when I watch it. It's a great way to start my day. So it's amazing to me and gratifying that it's had that impact. And it's also one of the only books that really gives an inside look at the circus sideshow, on these actors on the outside, on the outdoor stage, like Stoney. It gives voice to the voiceless, and that's been a big mission of mine in everything that I do.
Alan, before we go too far, do you have a URL that you could toss out for us that people can find a lot of what we're talking about today?
Yes, my organization, Documentary Arts, has the website documentaryarts.org, and that's pretty much contains information on all the books. I have published 40 mainstream books, but I've also made, more than a dozen artist books that are in various museum collections, and the film, theatrical productions. Everything is pretty much there. But Documentary Arts has several websites. That's a good starting point because it links to the other websites. So I have websites for the films. There was a 35-year project I did with the National Endowment for the Arts called Masters of Traditional Art. That has a website, mastersoftraditionalarts.org. So my work has always been in different media. And Documentary Arts I founded in 1985.
All right.
To advance new perspectives on historical issues in diverse cultures.
Hang on. We got to put a pin in it right there for now. Hang on. Alan Govenar is on the line. This is fascinating. We haven't even got to what I wanted to talk to him about yet. Gee. You were listening to NH Unscripted. Ooh, this is one of those days we just got treasure upon treasure. 1450 AM, 103.9 FM on your transistor radios. We are coming to you from the Car 54 light digs of the WKXL studios in Concord. NHTalkRadio.com is our URL. Once again, filmmaker and fascinating guest Alan Govenar is on the line. We will be right back. Welcome back to NH Unscripted. Oh, yeah, baby. We are deep today. Deep in treasure. Gold. It's radio gold here. We are coming to you from the Petticoat Junction Light Digs of the WKXL studios in Concord. Yeah, it's the famous water tower. I can see it from here. 1450 AM, 103.9 FM on your transistor radios. Poor kids got the 8 transistor. We got the 16. 101.9 FM for those beautiful souls in Manchester. Alan Govenar's on the line, and there is so much to talk about, but I promised him we would get to Quiet Voices in a Noisy World, the struggle for change in Jasper, Texas. Alan, explain to me how this came about and how you got involved, if you would.
Quiet Voices in a Noisy World, the struggle for change in Jasper, Texas, evolved over a period of 30 years. And it is very much emblematic of the kinds of projects I have undertaken, which span many years, like Stoney. That's where it started. Quiet Voices in the Noisy World was an outgrowth of other work that I was doing. In 1984, I had gotten a commission from the Dallas Museum of Art to do a project called Living Texas Blues. And at that time, it was a small book, 3 short films, one of which I made with Les Blank, and an anthology audio recordings. And I was looking for the work of Black photographers. And I talked to 2 curators who were putting together a 2-volume history of Texas photography. I had come to Texas in 1980 to finish a doctorate at the University of Texas at Dallas, and stayed in Dallas because I got this commission. And the people I met with, when I asked them about what Black photographers they were including in their books, they said there weren't any because they could not identify any in existing collections. And I was enraged, and I started researching Black photographers in Texas and was fortunate enough to meet several individuals, photographers who were then in their 70s and 80s. And I used their photographs in the Living Texas Blues project. Then I continued doing books at the same time on Texas blues because so little had been written about Texas blues. And it led to a book called Meeting the Blues. In 1988, I met Kalita Doolin, an artist, and we married in 89. And she started to become interested in what I was doing. And as the work on black photography expanded, I was looking for institutions in the state that would become a repository of these collections that I was identifying. But I couldn't find any that were really wanting to do this at that point or had the capacity to do it. So in 1995, artist Kalita Doolin and I founded what we called the Texas African American Photography Archive. And that archive became one of the few independent archives in the country to be funded by the National Archives in Washington. And through that funding, which ran for about 3.5 years, the last phase of it was doing a regional archivist position that would work in historically black colleges in Texas. And so work that we were doing in Wiley College in Marshall, Texas, I was working with a black history professor, Lloyd Thompson, whose wife, Bertha, was a grade school and teacher in Jasper. And she knew the widow of a photographer, Alonzo Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
And Alonzo was a black barber in town. He was highly respected as a community person. He was an elder in his church. He was a tireless volunteer for the betterment of his community. And he had passed away in the 1980s. So when I went to Jasper in 1996, I met with his widow, who was up in years, and her goddaughter. And the studio, the barbershop, was a wreck. The roof had been torn off by a storm. And Mrs. Jordan gifted her husband's collection and what could be saved to the Texas African American Photography Archive. Well, 2 years later, there was the terrible lynching of James Byrd Jr. in Jasper. And Jasper was thrust into national attention. And I continued working in Jasper and trying to organize photographs. The national coverage of James Byrd, for me, was somewhat incomplete, and it didn't really get deep enough into the history of virulent racial violence in that part of Texas. And so I organized a few different exhibitions, which led finally in 2011 to a more major exhibition that I did at the International Center of Photography. And there was a book published by the ICP and the German publisher Steidl about Jasper, about the photographs of Alonzo Jordan that I compiled and wrote. And after that book was published, that was the year I got a Guggenheim Fellowship. My Guggenheim Fellowship was for the work that I was doing in Jasper and wanting to organize this exhibition. Well, I was contacted after the book was published by someone who was involved and maybe the head of an alumni association for the segregated schools in Jasper. And they got 300 copies of this book. And they had, at that point, because the collection was such a wreck, we only could identify about 5% of the photos.
Oh, my God.
Well, they sent these books nationwide to people who had graduated this J.H. Rose School, and they sent me back a spreadsheet with 95% of the people identified. And I started to get to know this group of people who became the main current-day subject of the movie. And it were these African-American men and women who were volunteers, who had that had fairly successful careers who were coming back to Jasper to reclaim their history. They had family land there. They had a history there that they wanted to preserve and present.
Yeah.
And I started seeing the projects that they were starting. They started these little museums. They were putting up roadside markers. They were fighting against the politics of erasure by doing what needed to be done. And they were very forward-thinking. They were trying to bridge this horrible racial divide between whites and blacks in this area of Texas. And we're talking about a little town that when I think I first went there, the population was 8,000, and now it's probably 6, with more than half the population is black. And so I started making little short films. Truth in Photography is an online magazine that Documentary Arts developed in association with the ICP in New York, Magnum Photos, and Aperture. And we featured some of the work from, the collections we were building, and I started meeting more people. And that I did these little short films, and then it eventually, I felt with everything that was going on that this was a very timely movie. It wasn't just about history. It's what people are doing in the present tense to better their world. And so the film premiered at Cinema Village in New York last November, and we just did the Texas premiere, which I decided to do in Jasper, Texas. And it was an amazing event.
In what way?
And
hang on, Alan, hang on. Of course I would ask you that, just as we're heading into a break. Oh my gosh, this is fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. You are listening to NH Unscripted. I know you're feeling lucky. I know you are. We are coming to you from the Laugh In Like Digs of the WKXL studios in Concord, baby. Yeah, sock it to me. 1450 AM, 103.9 FM on those transistor radios. NHTalkRadio.com is our URL. Alan Gardner's on the line. Absolutely riveting information. Alan, I stopped you there. We'll grab that story, and when we come back, hang on. Welcome back to NH Unscripted. Oh my gosh, I'm doing the happy dance there. We are coming to you from the Taj Mahal-like digs of the WKXL studios in Concord. My God, it's cavernous in here. 1450 AM, 103.9 FM on your Sony Walkmans, 101.9 FM for those beautiful souls in Manchester. NHTalkRadio.com is our URL, and there is so much happening here at the station. I mean, in the mornings, you got WKXL in the morning where Andrew and Ken just kind of bump gums for a while and give you the latest stuff in the news and community stuff. We are celebrating 80 years of community radio here in Concord. A remarkable record in and of itself. Go out to the URL, NHTalkRadio.com. This show comes to you, by the way, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings at 9 a.m. Mondays, of course, we take a little slightly different turn, take you back to the 60s, and we've been doing some anti-war protest songs from the 60s, some band songs from the 60s. Might be a common thread there. Anyway, I don't want to waste Alan's time. Talking about quiet voices in a noisy world. And, sir, before we go too far, if you don't mind, I was watching it the other day, and can I say it was not what I thought it would be. It starts off talking about that the death there of what's his name? James. What's his name?
Bird.
Yes, James Bird. And I thought, this is going to be a brutal, brutal film. But may I say, it's gentle. It was remarkably gentle. I don't know what I was expecting, but I was caught up in it. To all these little museums they're building out there. These people were just so they were so wonderful to listen to. I don't know any other way to put it. It was a peaceful, gentle film. Again, not anything. They weren't bitter. They weren't angry. They were just they're just normal people. My gosh. For all that had taken place down there, Alan, it's a beautiful film. Anyway, I'm done rambling there, but go ahead and finish.
Well, thank you. And that's the way it felt at the premiere of this movie. I mean, it was an interesting mix. There were white people that came. There were 4 Jasper City Council people came. You know, we did some response videos. People were grateful that this movie exists. I left Jasper, and for me, it was one of the most inspiring and gratifying public events I've done. And I've done a lot of them. But people were so genuinely moved by the movie and so genuinely moved by the proactive attitude of the people who were in it.
Yeah, I could get that.
So I came away from Jasper with the feeling of hope. Change is possible during these very difficult times. And for me, you know, this is America at the crossroads in terms of the way we understand our relationship to the past and its meaning in the present. So for me, this movie is a deep expression and a culmination, certainly, of the work that I did in Jasper. But in addition to screening the movie in Jasper, we were able to present to the people there who are organizing these museums a hard drive with over 5,000 scans of the photographs that we conserved and have preserved, and we gave it back to the community for their use. And so that was also meaningful and gratifying. And people, Mrs. Jordan, who's been long deceased, her goddaughter, who was there on the first day that I went to Jasper, was at this event. And she was nearly in tears that all these photographs that were almost completely destroyed have survived and they have come home to Jasper. So this project for me is very much an expression of my deepest aspirations and the goals of documentary art.
May I ask you, Alan, you come from Dorchester, which has had its own issues racially. How did you escape that? How do I put it? Back in the 60s and 70s, Dorchester and some of the other areas around here were not kind.
No, in fact, it was yes, you're absolutely right. And, for me, I think my interest in African-American culture comes from growing up there. And I was very fortunate to have parents who were socially progressive. My father was a tireless volunteer. He worked a day job that he never particularly liked. He had aspired to be a writer. He, in later years, took great pleasure in seeing my career evolve as a writer. But he was someone who had different values. He was about living in a mixed world. So when I was 4 years old, we got our first little portable record player and 4 LPs. And one of them was Sarah Vaughan, Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker. Another one was New Orleans R&B. Wow. So I was introduced to black music at an early age, and my parents struggled to make ends meet. And I don't think I actually got another LP until I was 13. after we moved from Dorchester. So I listened to those records over and over again. And, I grew up in the 60s. I came of age in the 60s. My novel is about coming of age and the shattering of innocence at the end of the 1960s. Come Round Right is about hitchhiking, journeying across America, trying to find redemption and forgiveness for myself and for others. So this work, and, I've written, probably, more than a dozen books about different aspects of African-American life, music, and culture. But my approach to making these books and to making these films is to really bring out the points of view of the people who are the subjects. I don't impose myself. My books on blues, my last big blues book, which is called Texas Blues, The Rise of the Contemporary Sound, is like 100 different edited interviews. Wow. But it's basically edited oral histories with people telling their stories. Sometimes they contradict each other. Sometimes they're very much in sync. But you hear the voices of the people. And that's very much what I'm after, not only in my documentary work, but in my fiction, my poetry, and it also filters into the way I see the world, the way I frame the world as a photographer.
I have told the story here a couple of times on the radio, on our station here, that I grew up in the 70s as well, and I went to school in Boston during the 70s, and it was terrible. We had forced busing, segregation, all that, and people were just going crazy. And at one point, I was in college, and there was commotion happening outside the building, and I ran over. I didn't get to see it firsthand because there was a crowd, but later on in the day, I found out there was a young black man who stopped at a red light on Longwood Ave, and they had dragged him out of his car and were attempting to stone him as he was running away. It was a frightening time.
My parents had moved away. We moved from Dorchester in 1959.
Got you.
And it was very painful for my parents, particularly my mother, because she had grown up in the triple-decker we lived in.
Uh-huh.
My grandmother had bought one of those triple-deckers. She was the Russian, or actually she was from Belarus. She was an immigrant and eventually was able to buy one of those triple-deckers. And we lived on the ground floor, and my aunts and uncles lived on the upper floors. So it was very difficult to move. But yes, that is, what happened in Boston, what happened in Dorchester, was a level of racial violence that I think if you didn't live it and weren't there, it's not really...
Yeah. Alan, I need to cut you off, unfortunately. Can you give
a URL? That's okay.
Give us a URL one more time, my friend.
DocumentaryArt.org.
It's a chock-full website. Chock-full. I've been out there. I spend hours out there just roaming around. Yes. NH Unscripted, folks. We will catch you on the next one. Thank you, Alan.